Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's ACMA webinar, Breaking into Life Sciences. I'm today's host, Robert Laudadio, Director at the ACMA. We've got two wonderful guests sharing their insights today and their experiences on how they transitioned from being a pharmacist into industry. And they're going to share their insights and some of those experiences with us throughout the day. We'll be able to answer some of your questions as we're going along. A little bit about the ACMA. The Accreditation Council for Medical Affairs is the accrediting body for life sciences and a leader in accreditation, certification, and training for both organizations and professionals. At the end of today's webinar, we'll be providing you with links on how to gain access to past webinars, as well as articles and blogs and free information that you can get on different roles in the life sciences and pharmaceutical industries. Just a quick note that today's opinions expressed are those of our guests. And at the end of this session, we'll have an opportunity for you to ask questions, as I mentioned before, as well as be able to submit. I would encourage you guys to submit those during the session as well, in case some questions come up throughout the discussion. But with that, let me introduce our guests. I'm going to start with Dr. Megan Slaga. She's a PharmD and Director of Integrated Health with L'Oréal Dermatological Beauty and is a pharmacist by training. Megan began her pharmacy career in the ambulatory setting, identifying and leading pharmacy initiatives with a large multi-specialty medical group. From there, she transitioned into value-based care, creating and leading the pharmacy department for a national value-based independent primary care startup. After 5 years working as a startup, Megan spent time within the pharmacy consulting space for large health systems, and she has a passion for innovative development, strategy, and skin health. Megan made the transition from the traditional healthcare system to skincare, and today she focuses on bringing skin health education to pharmacists by leading the development and the pharmacy partnership at L'Oréal Dermatological Beauty, Brand Cervi, and hopefully I say this right, La Roche-Posay.
Perfect.
I also want to introduce our other guest, which is Dr. Suzanne Soliman. She's a PharmD and a board-certified medical affairs specialist. She's a seasoned pharmacist and author of The Ultimate Guide of Becoming an MSL, which I do believe is a Amazon pharmacy bestseller.
Yes, it is.
She's an educator. She has a rich career spanning clinical practice, medical affairs, and academia. She holds degrees at the University of Illinois, Chicago, and Midwestern University, and she's served as a clinical pharmacist, Medical Science Liaison, and has held an assistant and associate dean positions at UIC and Touro College of Pharmacy. She's also founded Pharmacist Moms. It's the largest organization of pharmacists in the U.S., and she's played a prominent role and has a voice with over 300 publications. She's had national presentations on pharmacy, parenting, and women's issue. She's also the recipient of the Rufus Lyman Award and Next Generation Pharmacist Civic Leader. She's recognized as an expert, contributing to journals, and has been featured in major media outlets as a pharmacist. You have quite a following, though. How many people do you have following you on TikTok and IG and the rest? I think it's over 100,000.
Yeah,
well over 100. Yeah. And also, if I didn't mention it before, Dr. Soliman is also the Chief Academic Officer here at the ACMA. So with that, we'd love to kind of get your insights. But before we do that, can you tell us a little bit about how you guys started in pharmacy and became a pharmacist?
Yeah, I can go ahead and get started. In terms of how I got started, I'll take you back to when Meg was a little bit younger, junior in high school. Felt like I was in a place that I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I was fortunate that I had family that were in the healthcare industry. So while they weren't pharmacists or providers or physicians, they worked in healthcare. And so I had the opportunity to shadow an incredible director of pharmacy at one of the local health systems in Buffalo, New York. And at that time, Epic was this new exciting thing. And so I had the opportunity to work alongside and volunteer within the health system to be the person taking each individual bottle off of the shelf in the pharmacy, scanning it into this new innovative system, and learning about how this was going to transform healthcare system. And that really is what sparked it for me, that there was a true opportunity here for pharmacy to do even more, to become something bigger. And there was so much opportunity for growth and innovation. And that's what really drove me to doing pharmacy, specifically tailored with my interest and love for helping others. And so I knew that those two things together made pharmacy the perfect fit for me.
That's great. Susan, yours?
That's amazing. Because I think for me too, it was when I was my first semester of college, because at first I was like, I wasn't sure. I knew I wanted to go into healthcare, but then I said, well, I'm not sure where or what or how I could fit it in. But I went to a presentation on pharmacy, and it was given by a pharmacist, and she just talked about all the different career opportunities. And from there, I was like, yeah, that's what I want. I do not want to do the same thing every day. Like, to me, that was just not what I wanted to do. And so I knew that pharmacy was going to give me those opportunities to just, work in different areas. And that's really why I wanted to go into pharmacy.
Well, I mean, it's a really unique opportunity today, because we have Suzanne, who's gone into maybe a little bit more of a traditional with the medical affairs side of things when she entered industry, and you actually went into more of a marketing commercial side of things. Can you give us a little bit about, Susan, maybe you started as, why did you transition from being a pharmacist into industry from your perspective and what you saw?
So for me, I never really worked in a traditional pharmacy per se. So after school, I did a residency and I worked more clinical. And then I had presented at a national meeting. I received a call from a recruiter, and this was many years ago, where I had no clue what a medical science liaison was. So she called me, she left a voicemail. She's like, oh, I went to your presentation, and are you interested in becoming a medical science liaison? And I'm like, what is that? Tell me about it. She's like, well, you get a car, and you get, your this paid for, and you can travel the world. And I was like, sure. Like, yeah. So let me hear a little bit more about it. And so then I explored the opportunities. And although I loved academia at the time, I really, I felt like, let me try this, and it sounds fun. And I mean, she was right. I got to travel all over, the world really for a couple of years, which was great. I loved it. So it was interesting. Again, it wasn't something I planned to do, but it just kind of fell,
And took advantage of the opportunity when it presented itself, which is great.
Yeah. And I think similarly, I had no idea that this opportunity existed. I mean, who would think that a pharmacist could work at a global company like L'Oréal, and be in more of this marketing commercial type space? For me, I think what drove me to even start to consider other areas was just feeling like I did a lot in the traditional healthcare space, and starting to feel kind of like, Susie, you were saying, that like every day being a little bit similar, like while it was different, there was the similarities were the same, working on the same sorts of initiatives, building the same sorts of programs. And I felt like there was more that could be done. Exactly. There was more innovation. And so when I was looking for my next career opportunity, I just happened to come across on LinkedIn that they were looking for a pharmacist at L'Oréal. And that's once I saw it, I knew that was it. That was the job.
Yeah.
Great. I mean, we're all three of us were actually at ASHP or last year for the mid-year. And that's a unique situation, because obviously you have a lot of PharmD students who are trying to match, but some of them don't quite get an opportunity to either find an opportunity going forward. But I mean, what would you say to them, because you're in industry, what they should be looking at and sort of how they want to approach things?
Yeah, I think that this is such a perfect time, right? As we were talking offline about, no match recently happened, and now is such a great time for folks to be thinking about like what else is out there. And I think the ways in which to look for that, I think a lot of people are doing already today, but if not, looking at LinkedIn, looking to their network to figure out what other opportunities exist, using keywords to be a bit more strategic and open. So maybe it's not looking for pharmacists. I think even speaking to my own industry, if you type in pharmacist, you're probably not going to come up with something. But if you look for medical, or if you look for more science, there's opportunities there that exist. If you just look for the right keywords and open that.
100%. I love that. I love the keyword search. So I think even life sciences, because I don't even think we're taught that term, life sciences, but that's really the area that they're looking for. And I always tell my students this as well, my P4 students who come on rotation, that even if you don't match, like right now, I actually conducted some research. We presented it a couple meetings ago at ASHP. 80% of pharmacists who work in pharma did not do a residency. So just because you didn't do a residency, it doesn't mean, you're not going to get this job. So I think that you really have to begin to paint the picture and make yourself look really good on paper in other ways. And
Yeah.
there's other ways to do it. It doesn't have to be, a residency is important. I did a residency. I think I'm not saying that it's terrible to do one, but if you don't do one, I think, you're still alive,
Your
right?
education and your career still stands on its own.
Yeah.
I mean, you still move forward, which is important.
And I can share, I didn't do a residency.
Yeah,
so I think we give like two unique perspectives. We ended up in really great places that we wouldn't have expected, but in two very different pathways. And to your point, it's not the end all be all.
100%.
You can still get to somewhere great.
Well, when you look at those two different pathways, what do you think were the transferable skills or the skills that you had that really complemented each, from each side, that you took into an opportunity?
Yeah. I think for, thinking about myself and maybe looking at our industry, skills that are transferable are going to be, I think, things, adaptability. Like we talked about the fact that sometimes maybe if you're in a traditional setting, you're going to see some similar, if not the same things day in and day out. When you're on the industry side, you have to be adaptable, right? And that's, I think, a skill that a lot of pharmacists have is they can quickly adapt. I think communication too. Pharmacists are great communicators. 100%. They educate day in and day out, whether that's a provider on the phone or whether that's a patient that's coming up to you or talking to a payer. Communication is such a big transferable skill that I think pharmacists have today that really lend well to this industry.
100%. That's the one I was going to say, communication skills. You have to have those. I mean, written communication skills, but then you're speaking, your oral communication, being able to give a presentation if you need to speak to others. I think that is so important.
Huge
I mean, you hit them, and I think business acumen might also help. I know when we're in pharmacy school, we're like, why am I taking this managerial class? Why do I have to take this business class? Like, that's not important, but they're actually very important. A lot of those marketing courses that we have that we're required to take that a lot of pharmacists are like, no, I only want to take the sciences. And, I think those are really important as well during school.
Yeah.
And is there any specific skills that you think that you don't get besides the ones you just mentioned that you really need to start to focus on that go beyond, let's say, the soft skills or any of those types of things, or is it really, trying to gather business acumen and things of that nature?
Yeah, I think soft skills are incredibly important, like the communication, the public speaking, those are really crucial. But I do think kind of going down that business development side, like being familiar with Microsoft Office or Google, if that's what your company uses, like you got to know a little bit about PowerPoint, Excel, Word, like 100%. To be able to keep moving. So I think that those are some things that people, if you've never opened a Word document before, an Excel file, like those are places maybe to start and get familiar with.
What about, you think there was any misconceptions though that you think pharmacists may have when they're thinking about transitioning into industry? Is there any misconceptions that you may have had?
I think that a lot of times people feel like, oh, I shouldn't apply for that job. Like, I don't have the skill set. Oh, I didn't do a residency, or I've only been doing this. But I think you really have to look at everything you've done and highlight every single thing. Like, remember what you've done. So, and kind of package that. So did you lead a vaccination program? What did you do with that vaccination program? So I think there's a lot of qualities that you have to just kind of look at your current career and kind of transfer them versus thinking you don't have it. Because I think that's a misconception. Like, oh, I don't have the skill set. Or I've been in industry I've been working in retail for 15 years and, I can't leave. I'll never get accepted. And I think that's a misconception.
I mean, let's focus on someone who maybe be in industry, in the pharmacy space, whether it's specialty or retail for the last few years. And they want to make that transition. It's not. Is it as big as they might believe it to be, or is it something that you think is more obtainable for them? Obviously, being able to position themselves well with an opportunity.
Yeah, I don't think it's as hopefully not as challenging for most to be of a transition. There are definitely differences, huge differences. I can speak for my experience. I think the organization itself, the structure itself is very different. And I think that was one of the biggest learning curves for me is just, I think healthcare has a very standard kind of hierarchy to things. And I think that at least in the industry I'm in, it's not always that way. You might be talking to your boss's boss one day. You might be working alongside, you might be a director working alongside a manager, very hand in hand. Like there's a very different approach, I think, to kind of that organizational structure that might not be expected, but I think is an easy new challenge maybe to overcome for folks.
Yeah, definitely. I think that I always say you have to there's kind of two different areas. So the first area is you have to look good on paper. So before you can even land an interview, and if you're not landing an interview, that means you don't look good on paper. And so that's where I talk about in my book, like a lot of the transferable skills that you need to begin to put into your resume or your CV. So, because if you don't look good on paper, you're not going to get an interview. So it's not necessarily you, but it's probably, you know, how you put this package together. And then if you're getting interviews, if you're not landing the role, then it's probably your interviewing skills. So I think it's kind of two different.
I mean,
processes.
this is a good book for kind of walking people through it.
Yeah.
Right there. But you know, one of the things I also think is kind of interesting is this quantity versus quality thing, especially when you're job hunting. Obviously, there's pressure when you're looking for an opportunity. You know, can you talk a little bit about really focusing on more of a quality type of focus when you're going to post for a job or look for a job versus maybe trying to apply for a lot of different things? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's tremendous pressure to go to the quantity approach, and I get that. I think we've all been there. But I think what also is true is that when you find the roles that really speak to you, that are where you feel like your strengths and the role, at least from the way you're reading it, align beautifully, there's this drive and this motivation to give it that quality approach. And so maybe honing in and saving yourself the time applying for jobs that maybe don't feel like that quality piece are a really great way to approach it. And then giving those ones that do feel those handful of opportunities that feel like quality, giving them your 100% of your effort to go for those ones.
Yeah.
What are kind of some of the roles that, you know, someone should be exploring, whether they're looking at sort of the medical affairs side of things or on the marketing side of things? What are the different? I mean, we kind of know, although you did do the survey with who, do you know what an MSL is while you're at ASHP? And not a lot of people knew what an MSL was.
No, a lot of them did not.
Well, actually, maybe you could talk about the difference between, say, a pharmaceutical rep and an MSL.
Yeah.
You want to speak to that a little bit?
I mean, I think that unfortunately, what I found through a lot of other research that I published too at ASHP was that during pharmacy school, we do not get enough education on these other careers. So I think we have a lot of emphasis placed on traditional roles like retail or community practice or hospital or health system practice, and which is great. And that's really what we're trained for. But a lot of times, many schools don't have a lot of electives and classes, you know, in marketing or medical science liaison courses or medical affairs courses. And so actually recently I've partnered, like the ACMA has partnered with about 20 colleges of pharmacy where we offer a medical affairs competency certificate with the schools. And I think that's really important because I think we need to start to educate pharmacists a little bit earlier, like while we're in school, about these other careers. Because you're right, like during the meeting, I walked around with the mic and I'm asking people, "What's an MSL?" And everyone's like, "I don't know." Like I think I know, I don't know. And so I mean, we're still seeing it, and medical science liaisons have been around for many years. I mean, and I think so. Going back to your question, the difference between an MSL and a pharmaceutical sales rep is that the medical science liaison does need a terminal degree. So they would need to have a PharmD or a PhD or a physician, and that they're not really selling per se directly to the physicians, but they're really educating more. So again, you need the communication and all of the skills that you're, you know, we were talking about earlier.
So if you think about it, you know, in the marketing side of things, so let's say that, you know, the PharmD or the someone with a terminal degree is looking for an opportunity as so sales and marketing. I mean, what are the different types of roles that they should be looking for if that's something that's calling them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it comes back to we were talking about earlier with the keyword searches. I think like medical, so either medical affairs, medical communications, medical science liaison, like expanding that word a little bit more, sciences, life sciences. I think those are what, you know, from a
I have a whole section in my book called keyword search in terms because people email me and they're like asking me, or they'll message me and they ask for that, and that's great. Like every single word you said, I'm like 100%. You need to know all these words.
Yeah. And I think that's where people, pharmacists and pharmacy students sell themselves short. They type in pharmacy or pharmacist or PharmD, and you're not going to capture all that is out there, all the opportunities that are out there. And I think the other thing I'll echo too that Susie was saying earlier was just about, you know, your resume and the way that you write your resume, and even your LinkedIn page too. Like if you don't have the right buzzwords in there that people are looking for,
100%.
you're going to be missed for opportunities, but you're also going to have a hard time finding those opportunities.
I mean, and I, you know, as a hiring manager, you know, in a large company, I think one of the things that I always found was that someone with a terminal degree, especially on the sales side, really does a great job representing the product because they do get an opportunity to kind of have a relationship with a physician or a key opinion leader that's slightly different than someone who may not.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would certainly consider things like field reimbursement managers. I would consider pharmaceutical sales reps in addition to medical affairs organization type roles in MSLs, medical writing. Those are the different types of things. And
definitely.
And those all are great opportunities for someone who's looking to transition besides just one specific thing.
Medical information. I always say start there. If you can't go anywhere else, start at MedInfo, you know,
Perfect.
and then,
And I think if your long-term goal is to maybe get into medical affairs, if you can get in through field reimbursement or through sales, large organizations have an opportunity for you to cross
100%
across different organizational boundaries, which is also exciting.
Yeah, definitely.
We have an example even within our industry of a pharmacist joining as a derm sales rep. I mean, that didn't have pharmacist in the job description. That didn't have it even in the requirements, but I think it's a brilliant way to start, you know, learning the products, getting to know that face-to-face interaction with providers, and then growing from there into additional opportunities within the company. So I think I completely align with that.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And I also encourage anybody who wants to submit a question, feel free to submit questions. We'll try to answer them along the way. And I'm being signaled, but I don't see them on my screen. So you'll have to send them to me when you can. But in addition to, I wanted to just kind of talk about how do you see the pharmacist role changing, though, in the next 5 years? So, I mean, you know, obviously there's a lot of different market dynamics. There's a lot of changes in healthcare. How do you see their roles maybe changing as well?
So I would say that I saw something in People magazine, right? 2 days ago, it was Bill Gates, and he was saying that everything's changing, right? Yeah. Their physicians are attorneys, pharmacy. He was saying how careers are going to change because of AI, you know, and I do think AI will impact pretty much every single job. I mean, it already has. It's impacted students, right? I know my kids, you know, like kids are aware of AI, whether they're in college or whether they're young, you know, they know what ChatGPT is. So I think, you know, pharmacy, I do see it changing. I think that they've talked about provider status for many, many years. I do not personally think that's going to happen because I think they've been talking about it for like 50 plus years. I don't see it happening in the next 20 plus years. I really don't, but maybe it will. I just think that there's a lot of talk of it, but I don't think it'll probably happen in the next decade or so. I do think, though, there's many new opportunities. That's what I really want to touch on is that there's different opportunities, like the opportunities we have that did not exist when I was in pharmacy school at all, or they weren't talked about. So I think there's new opportunities and there's different types of opportunities versus, you know, a traditional practice role, kind of where we think about that. I think that there's just so many other areas that pharmacists can go into now that's kind of leaving some of those job opportunities open too. So there's a lot of vacancies in some of the traditional roles.
Absolutely. And I think that the other piece of it is I align with you, unfortunately, on our state of provider status, but we are thankfully in a position too where some of these global companies, like I can speak to mine in particular, we have this global influence, which is really nice. So while things are different in different countries and they have different ways of looking at pharmacists, and pharmacists have different scopes of practice in different countries, I think it's positive to see that we are, I think our nation as a whole is looking globally for inspiration and to see like what are pharmacists capable of doing and what are they doing in different areas of the world. And hopefully that can continue to help grow and expand for our pharmacists in the US as well.
100%. And I would echo that, like in terms of, I mean, just thinking about birth control, right? So now they're, you know, over-the-counter birth control or what pharmacists can do. And in certain states, pharmacists can renew a birth control pill, where when I was a pharmacy tech, and that was not allowed. No. So I think, you know, there are changes, and I think our roles can expand. And I think that especially if there's shortages in certain areas or in rural areas, and so there are definitely a lot of more opportunities, but we'll see.
Getting there.
Well, we got a couple of questions, and I thought maybe we'll break it up a little bit. And one of the questions is that many MSL positions seem to favor those with PharmDs. But this person has a PhD in nursing, and she wants some suggestions about how she can kind of bridge that gap and move from academia into an MSL role. So what are your thoughts about that?
So a PhD is very well qualified for any medical science liaison role. Again, I talk about this in my book. So I think that the first thing is I would say, are you getting the interviews? If you're not, I would look into probably more training or certification to kind of echo it out, like a BCMAS. I would look into doing that. If you've already done that and you have the training, then just upping your your skill set. So what area of practice are you an expert in? So you're a nurse, a PhD in nursing, which is amazing. So are you in, neurology, oncology? What was your field? Cardiology. So for myself, I did my training in cardiology. So when I was an MSL, I was an MSL in the cardiology area. So I think you want to kind of pick an area that you are an expert in, and then you get your certification. You could, if you've written articles, again, LinkedIn. I know you've mentioned LinkedIn a lot. You need to use LinkedIn.
Yeah.
If you're not on LinkedIn, you do not exist. So if you're not on LinkedIn, and you must be because you're here. So that's very good. That's important. So, but creating relationships, posting about new drugs, new information, becoming a leader in that area, or contributing to other people's conversations as well in that area.
And I think that's actually important, that when you're connecting with individuals, connecting them not when you need it, but when you have it in advance.
Yeah.
So take the time, reach out to all of us and connect and sign up. There'll be links at the end of the presentation. We're actually going to have a page where everybody's socials and things are available. But now's the time to actually connect and talk with them and have that conversation.
Yeah.
Actually, we've got another. It's a very similar kind of conversation, but it's an Pharm degree. It's a UK degree versus a PharmD. Does that put someone at a disadvantage, or when they're looking to get into industry and sort of an MSL or a role?
Yeah, I think coming from a company, again, that's globally based, I think that opens up a lot of opportunities for those UK-based opportunities in those backgrounds. And so I think that there is still great opportunity out there. I think that there might be times when we as pharmacists have to educate the person who is looking and who is posting these positions. I think that they don't always know what that means. How does that translate? What skill sets do you have as a result of that? Is that the same? So I think that that's a really great opportunity for someone to maybe in their cover letter or when they reach out to someone, make sure that they understand that, yes, maybe this isn't exactly what's in the job description, but here is why I am still a great candidate for this role because it does translate and transfer well.
Yeah.
100%.
And I will just add this, that I've actually worked with someone who is now the CEO of a major pharmaceutical company, and she started off with an Pharm degree from the UK. So I don't think there's any limitation there, but obviously there's a lot of effort and work that has to kind of go through it in order for you to be able to kind of get those results as well. But there's no cap on what you have when you have an Pharm or a bachelor's, a PharmD.
Yeah.
So let me look at here. Megan, you got a shout out.
Oh.
Okay. Good to see you. Again, this is sort of what are the entry-level jobs you would think that would hire a retail or staff pharmacist with minimal experience, even if it was like sort of part-time. Can you guys talk a little bit about it?
Yeah. I can start. I think in our industry, there's a lot of opportunity out there. Again, I think just leveraging and leaning into those soft skills that you have as a pharmacist is a great place to start. It really makes you a great candidate for a lot of the jobs that are currently available. I think that one of the things that you can do to differentiate yourself, even amongst those soft skills, is, what are you doing today in that retail setting that is unique? Are you helping to set up a pilot program? Are you getting more involved in counseling patients every day on maybe it's a skin health conversation? What are you doing in your current role that would set you up, that would differentiate you from other pharmacists who maybe have the same soft skills as you do?
I think, that's key. What you just said is differentiate yourself. So you need to differentiate yourself from others. So I think, medical writing, medical information, all of those are opportunities to enter in. But in order to get that interview, you have to differentiate yourself. So what have you done? Because a lot of people have a PharmD, a lot of people have a PhD. How are you different on paper? And you need to come up with some of exactly what you're saying, like volunteer for something, take on, have more conversations, develop a little clinic, that's going to really differentiate you versus someone else who's just working the 40 hours and doing the same old thing. And then you're really just saying, oh, well, I just want to leave my job because I don't like what I'm doing.
Well, this is actually a good segue because one of the questions was, what's the interview process like?
Oh,
so all right. So you got the opportunity to interview. You have to. What should they expect when they do get that opportunity and are speaking to? And actually, what winds up happening many times is that you're going to talk to an HR recruiter first before you get to the hiring manager. So maybe you want to just focus a little bit of insights on that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can share from my experience. I think that's spot on. You typically are going to talk to a recruiter before you talk to anyone directly within that team that you'd be working with, just to make sure that you do align and meet some of those criteria. If you move forward from there, every role is a little different, at least from my experience, whether it was in industry, out of industry. But I think typically then you have the chance to meet with the hiring manager and maybe someone else from the team as well, to make sure you're a good cultural fit, to make sure that you align with what they're looking for and what they need. And then you may even have to do, like in my case, meet with more senior executives and do more of a presenting. I had to do a presentation. So I think being prepared for that, being prepared to not just meet with, an HR manager and your hiring manager and you've got the job, you might have to put something together. You might have to actually show your skills. And I think that's where some of those like Microsoft Office, Google skills really come in handy. But I think that is pretty standard, I feel like, at this point.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think from the medical affairs side, you have to be able to present. They're going to ask you to present, probably almost like a journal club. So you'd have to be familiar with how to, statistical analysis. I think that's really important. So you want to make sure you go back and you brush up on your skills with that. So again, the interview is the whole second section. So if you're getting, you got the interview, then once you get the interview, and the interview can be, I know for myself, I had a 3-day interview at one time, so it was like a couple of them might be on the phone or on Zoom, and then another one will be in person. You might have to fly to a different city. I know I was living in Chicago at the time. I had to fly to Atlanta for my interview. So it depends really if they take you serious and how many candidates are in the pool. And then again, you need to differentiate yourself at that point as well. So it's there's a lot to expect. The interviews are a lot of times, questions that are based on decisions you've made in the past. So they're kind of like, tell me about this scenario. Tell me about, I have like 3 chapters on this too, because I get this question. I get this question a lot too, but I think that, you need to prepare for all of these possible questions that you might get.
And you really need to research the company that you're interviewing with, because as a hiring manager, I'm looking for that extra understanding about who we are, what we're doing. If we just recently had a product launch, do we actually have a little bit of an issue with something? How are you going to help fit into some of those things? So research those companies.
I had a video go viral about this because I made a video. I had interviewed somebody and I'm like, do you know who you're interviewing with? And she was like, no, I don't know. What company is this again? And I'm like, how are you interviewing with me? And you don't even know. She's like, I had a lot of interviews today, so I've not really. Oh, and it's like, do you really think? It was like, you're done. I shared that story. It was fun.
We do, because we're global with some of this. We have some advice, asking for some advice for foreign pharmacists who are looking to work in the U.S. Is that something you guys could comment on?
I don't know if I necessarily have the ability to. I don't know if Susie, you have more experience.
I think that you would probably look for certain careers. I think it's harder depending upon what country you're coming from, and then you might need to get paperwork set up for yourself, but it can be possible. Again, I think you need to look at careers that might be easier to enter versus jumping in as a medical science liaison. I would say that's probably one of the most difficult jobs to get if you're, in a foreign country and you're trying to come in. So I would look more towards medical writing or some type of office-based position, not a field-based position. So office-based is where you're, in-house, and then field-based is where you're working from home more or you're traveling more. And I think I would say that I would look for more office-based work.
In a lot of pharmaceutical organizations, obviously the larger ones are global.
Yeah.
So I really, sometimes if you want to work in the U.S., probably sometimes a stepping stone is finding something that's a little bit more regionally based, and then use the internal 100%. Networking process within an organization to transfer
100%.
to like a
Yeah, definitely. Because if you were working in your own country for a large pharma company, then they might transfer you over here, and you might even be in a different division, but you could stay with that company.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure, but what's the chance for IMG landing a role, an MSL role?
It's fine. I've worked with a lot of IMGs as MSLs, so and many of them did not get a U.S.-based residency or fellowship, so they were just trained as a physician, and they were I mean, I worked with them and I know some of them are leaders at large pharmaceutical companies now for MSL organizations. So I think if you have the education, again, it is about how you package yourself. If you do not know how to package yourself, then you need to, fix that. Like that's really, that's, I don't know what else to say, but that's, you got to package yourself so that you have sellable skills.
Right. I mean, we obviously have the BCMAS for the Board Certified Medical Affairs Specialist program, things like that. But what are some of the things that are in there that someone needs to kind of look at potentially in helping them sort of package themselves up or stand out?
So I think that provides kind of a foundational, provides you with the foundation that you need to succeed, because at that point you can say, look, I put in the time, I put in the dedication. Nobody's going to go and do a certification just for fun. So, I mean, just to say that you did that really shows your willingness and that you're, again, trying to differentiate yourself from someone else who doesn't have that. And anything you can do to make yourself different. And then, again, you're learning, right? So there's a lot of different areas that you will learn about within the BCMAS. So then you might say, you know what, I'm really interested in this specific area or this specific area. And I think that helps as well.
Yeah. I actually have another question. This one is actually a little bit different. I think we've answered it before, but I think we should reinforce it, which is this individual has broad but rooted experience in literature evaluation and evidence-based medicine. I have to tell you, I would think that there's a big push for people with strong evidence-based medicine experience as an MSL or in medical affairs. Do you guys want to comment on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think from my side, from our industry, absolutely. Like I immediately think of like medical affairs positions, medical science liaisons position, medical communications. I think those skills and that experience lend perfectly to those types of roles. So I think that that's a great place to start, and it's definitely something that's different than I think a lot of other pharmacists out there.
Yeah, I would even say marketing, because if you can dissect a study, you would probably be able to help with marketing as well. So absolutely. I think that is, I mean, that's great. Again, it's like how you're packaging it. So if you're able to do that, because don't take that for granted. A lot of people who are well trained are still not able to read a study. And that's why during the interview, they have you look through the study and analyze the study and analyze the products and all of that. So if you're able to do that, that already sets you apart. So, I
mean, and again, we have a lot of resources at the ACMA, free resources for you guys kind of learn about all those different things. But I think really we're talking about is the art of scientific storytelling at this point, which is that everything, we all hear the word storytelling, but it really is important, especially when you're trying to give evidence in a fair and balanced way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. And I think there's no way to say you've done too much. Like I've trained too much, or I've done, because I get that question a lot. Well, I have my degree, but I'm like, but still you've got to package it. Like as what you were saying, like whether you're just giving more skin consults, and talking to people, you have to package yourself and just differentiate yourself. So no work, the certification, doing more, it's not going to go unnoticed,
Absolutely.
Yeah. I have a question for Dr. Slaga.
Megan.
Or Megan. They're being very, very proper.
That's very kind.
I am going to answer the question. But Dane, basically want day in the life of Megan on your side of things. What is the day-to-day activities? What are you doing every day?
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about this earlier with adaptability and the fact that no 2 days are the same. And that is very true. I do not do this every Monday. So this is unique and fun and different. But it is truly that every day is very different. And I think very fortunate, that works really well with my personality and what I enjoy. I like that no 2 days are the same. But what I focus on are partnerships. So I love, one of my strengths is building partnerships, is strengthening relationships. I love meeting people and learning their stories and making that connection. And so that's a big part of what I do today, is building those relationships. And then the other side is building strategic initiatives and programs. I love to find opportunities, to find where the gap is and figure out how are we going to fill that void and build something together that can help to support patients. So a lot of my role involves nurturing those relationships, making those initial relationships, but then also taking a step back to build the program, build the initiative that's going to help to support my partner in whatever their outcome is. So.
And she just presented at APHA.
In case you didn't see
But see, that's the fun side of it. There's
Yeah.
also a dark side to our business,
Yes.
which is meetings upon
Oh,
meetings
yes.
upon
Oh, yes.
meetings. So
Yes.
share a little bit
Yes.
about that, because we
Yeah.
can have meetings by death, you know, on some of these things.
Absolutely. And I think, it's funny, it goes both ways. It's like you'll have days where you can't get up from your desk
Yes.
because you are sitting in meetings from 9 to
Yes.
5. And then you have other days where you don't talk to a single soul and you're like, but I want to be around people.
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah,
miss
yeah,
that
yeah.
interaction
You
and it
miss
can get really
people.
isolating.
Yes, 100%.
So it's a challenge of you have to be okay with having some of those days that are really crazy busy, filled with meetings, and but then also those that maybe you need to have more focus time and you have to have more alone time and you have to have that kind of isolation and or figuring out just how you best balance that. So absolutely there's a side to that. And then the other part of it is travel. Being honest, I know we're all parents in this room, and that's a reality, is that you do have to travel, and it can be a beautiful thing, and it is a beautiful thing. And then there's other times when it's hard, and that's just being real, like being realistic. So I think those are things that you have to take into account as well.
100%.
And I'm sorry I interrupt, but I mean, also in our industries though, a lot of our conferences are on the weekends, because what it is that your healthcare professionals are typically seeing patients during the week. And so the only time they really get the chance to meet with industry or get education is actually over the weekend. So that's kind of something you have to factor in when you consider looking at industry.
Yeah. You give up weekends, you give up, that family time, and definitely.
And again, I think we want to reinforce this because, we got a question again, which is that because there's a high volume of applicants that are, posting for jobs, what's your thought about reaching out to recruiters, like on LinkedIn, let's say, or trying to get noticed? I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is I feel like a hot topic. And there's so much to say about this.
I have a lot of thoughts too.
Yes, good. We can bounce off each other here. But I think LinkedIn is such a great tool and resource when it's leveraged the right way. Yeah. I think it gets challenging if you're reaching out at an off time and asking for something without knowing the person. I think that can be really challenging for the person on the other end of that. And so I do think that there is a strategic way to leverage that and to do that right. I think knowing your elevator pitch, so Susie's been saying, like the package, like who are you? But you have to be able to say that quickly and get someone's attention. So if you're writing, a multi-paragraph statement to someone,
I'm not reading it.
We're not going to read it. We're going to read the first sentence. And then if it doesn't catch my attention, it's going to be challenging. So I think it's important to really think about how you leverage LinkedIn and those reach outs as a strategic tool and opportunity, and think of it as like kind of that one shot that might help you, but time it right.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think you necessarily have to go through a recruiter. And it's the same thing I said about the residency. So you don't need them to get this. And I think LinkedIn is actually an underutilized tool because I think, some people don't even realize you can apply for a job on LinkedIn. Like some people don't realize like you could actually use it to apply for a job. So I think that utilizing that is, make sure you're kind of optimizing LinkedIn before I would probably even say you need to go to a recruiter. You might just need to optimize what you have.
Right.
Absolutely.
And even if you are using a recruiter, you really should continue to also self-serve yourself by going and posting directly.
Yeah.
Because you're kind of also putting your hands in someone else's,
definitely.
It's your career, it's your livelihood. You need to kind of make sure you own a lot of that.
Yeah, you have to self-advocate.
Yeah. And I'll say too, with the recruiter side of it, to kind of add on, it's just that they know as much as the job description, or they've had maybe a meeting to learn more about the role and the position and what is needed, but that hiring manager or someone on the team or someone who's closer to it might be able to better understand. So to your point, if you're able to build that network and reach out and have a connection with them, they're probably going to be the better fit to say, maybe they didn't have the buzzword in the resume that got them, they didn't get them into the system, but they have the ability to say, oh, this person has the soft skills or the strengths that I'm looking for in this particular team member.
Question. Can you give us a glimpse of a role of a pharmacist inside a cosmetic company?
Yeah, sure. So, and I can say, I work on our division called L'Oréal Dermatological Beauty. So we are focused on dermatological skincare. So not necessarily the cosmetic side of like the lipsticks, the Maybellines, that fun side, but really the dermatological beauty brands. And as a pharmacist, there's a couple of different pharmacists within our division, and they do different roles. So there's 2 pharmacists within our integrated health team itself. I focus on our retail pharmacy partnerships. My counterpart, Ethan, focuses more on the social media, continuing education for pharmacy students, that side of things. So we have 2 very different skill sets, which lends perfectly to these 2 different roles. And so even within our own team, two pharmacists doing two very different things. There's also another pharmacist on another brand within the division that does more of the like medical affairs work. She is really detail oriented, so bright, and she is the one who is helping to organize and coordinate different events and looking at studies and really focusing on the active ingredients and the products themselves. And so I think it's really neat to see that even within this division, within this global company, there are different pharmacists that all have very different backgrounds, very different experiences, but that lend perfectly to supporting the team.
It's great. Suzanne, you might take this one, which is, again, we're finding people who are talking about really strengths that they have that are a little bit narrow. So this individual has a lot of experience in pharmacovigilance, but does not have a pharmacist license. What are the opportunities for them?
You do not need a pharmacist license to work in industry. So I think that, again, that's a misconception that you need to be licensed. So if you have the degree, you need a degree, but you do not need to be licensed. And in fact, many times I've met people who lived in one state and they're licensed in that state, and then they move to a different state, but they don't get licensed in the new state that they're living in. So I think, if you have one license, that's great. And I would say keep it. But if you don't have any, you're still, you're fine.
Yep.
Okay. Great. So I'm going to just shout out to Lucy, our producer, and ask her if we have any more questions, but thank you. Okay. And here they come again. I'm going to have to read this one verbatim.
I saw your face. Yeah.
She gave me the hard one. I hold a PhD in neuroscience and a MSc in clinical neuropsychology, and I'm currently pursuing an MSL position. And in the interviews, I emphasize relevant experience gained through my studies in clinical research, which closely aligns of an MSL. And I might highlight his ACMA board certification, but despite this, they've had a little bit of difficulty getting into those roles in the industry. How do you think that they should be starting to kind of bridge some of the gaps? I mean, obviously this individual has a pretty strong background. Obviously he's gone through BCMAS. What can we help them with? And, and things that maybe they're not looking at or seeing.
I think it's where, again, are they getting the interviews? So if you're not getting the interviews, then we need to fix your resume. If you're getting the interviews and then they're not going to the next step, then it's your interview process. Then something is happening when you're interviewing that you might either need to, practice your interviewing skills, look into interviewing skills, talk, how you package yourself. Because I think I could get on the phone with someone and I could talk to them and they might look great on paper. And then all of a sudden you talk to them and you're like, no, I'm not going to hire them. So you really have to be able to present yourself, not just on paper, but also orally. And that's where the communication skills, because based on your qualifications, I'm like, well, it's amazing. You would be great for like a neuro MSL job, like right in my head, I'd be thinking that would be a great area for you. But if you're not able to kind of package yourself on the phone and they don't see that, then I do think that plays a role.
I mean, and sometimes that's hard for us to see because we're really feeling that we're checking all the boxes and things like that. But I also reach out to maybe a former colleague or someone that you're close to who can kind of help go through a mock interview with you or walk through that. I know that we're going to be kind of rolling out something called Career Corner throughout the rest of the year. And part of that sort of is helping someone do mock interviews and things of that nature. So I think that's also going to kind of help individuals, especially if you're a BCMAS professional, you'll be able to get access to that.
I think that's important. I think mock interviewing, you can ask, a friend, a colleague, somebody to just hear you. Talk to your mirror. I think, we learned that when we were young, giving our presentations in high school, but I think it's really important to be able to do that.
The other thing I would say too is just, we talked about it a little bit, but maybe like you could benefit from talking about it more. It's just like, what does your network look like? What else have you done besides hitting submit on your application? Like, do you know anyone yet in the industry? And if you don't, do you have opportunities to maybe go to something like an ASHP or an APHA or something local with your state chapter that you could get involved and start to meet people and grow that network? I think that that's another really great place to start if you don't have anyone yet that you can start to connect with.
Yeah. That's a good point. This is kind of a difficult question in some ways, but also probably something a little bit easier. Is how do you decipher or distinguish between a real recruiter versus a real legit recruiter versus someone who sort of just hanging a sign up there? Because, I don't know if there really is a way unless there's been a referral. I mean, that's the
Yeah, that's tricky. I know for pharmacists, more the traditional roles, there are some of the larger agencies that like you can kind of, okay, I know that I've heard of this agency before, so I'm familiar with it. If you're not, I think, again, LinkedIn being another really great resource. Commonly, if the job is posted on there, they'll link like who the recruiter or the hiring firm is that's working on that. But if it's someone who's just out of the blue reaching out, I think that's a little tricky. I think just asking the right questions, really vetting them is kind of like you would with any spam call or something, just making sure that you can kind of learn a little bit more. And
I think you have to go with your gut instincts. I mean, really, if something
doesn't seem right,
too good,
right.
It's probably
you gotta do it. I mean, we talk about all the effort people put into, get their terminal degrees, get their education, whether they go through board certifications, things of that nature. You've invested a lot of time. And so at that point, you have a good idea of what you know and don't know. And at that point, you're going to get a sense of it.
Yeah.
And I think, there's a question that just came in, which is that what are the most important things you need to focus on your CV? And I will tell you this, just as a hiring manager, it needs to match the job description. And I hate to say that, but there's a way of doing it without being misleading or disingenuous.
100%.
But those are the things that are really, really important, is that if I have a job description, I've taken the time as a hiring manager to kind of present what I'm looking for, then I'm really going to want to find how that's tied together. And you need to use those methods of kind of communicating it. But
I have a whole chapter.
This is not an expensive book. I encourage you to go get it.
I didn't even think you were going to say it, but I have like a whole chapter on that.
You're going to put us out of business with webinars by having this book.
You should not use the same resume or CV for every single job. That would be, you're never going to get a job, or, you have to tailor it.
Yeah.
You must tailor your resume or CV.
And that's where it comes back to, we were talking about quantity and quality earlier. If you're applying to, 200 jobs, you're probably using the exact same resume because you do not have time to update 200 resumes. But if you find, the 5 that maybe you're really passionate about, and you can tailor them to highlight and those strengths that you have, those skills that you have that align with that specific job, you're much more likely to get that opportunity.
Yeah.
So this is actually another interesting question. Looking at a job posting that says you must have direct pharmaceutical experience, but yet you have a wealth of experience. And how do you should you bridge that? Should you take your chance on that?
I say always take a chance.
I
always
100%.
You never know. And I think that's also where like network is so important too. I mean, it's how you package yourself, you sell yourself. Like, yes, maybe you don't meet that specific bullet point, but you have all of these other strengths and great assets that can help to support the company and what you need in this position. So I say always go for it, even if there's one bullet point. And I think that's where we fall short. Like we were talking about earlier is, I don't check this one box, so I'm just not going to do it. And I think that's where people sell themselves short. Yeah.
I mean, I think that, and again, personally, I've been kind of in that situation where they say they must have med device experience or must have pharmaceutical or must have consumer. But I really felt like that was the right role for me. And what I really made sure was that I was able to kind of communicate and bridge what they were looking for with the experience I had. And so I think that, if it's a role that you really do enjoy, really do want to try to go for, then I wouldn't let not having that direct experience do it. But again, it can't just be a spaghetti on the wall kind of situation. It's got to be something you're really passionate about.
Yes. And package yourself. Again, it's about that whole package.
They want the book name again. All right, we're going to give you the book name. It's The Ultimate Guide to Becoming a Medical Science Liaison by Suzanne Soliman. It's available on Amazon, and we'll have a link to it at the end of today's webinar. Let's see. We probably have time for, one more question, because I know both of you have hard stops. Again, Megan, I want to thank you for coming up from Philadelphia to kind of visit with us, Suzanne, for taking time out of your busy calendar to do that. And I think the link has gone up.
Nice.
So is that our time? Oh, we have 5 minutes. Okay. Okay. Oh, okay. So this is an interesting question. I think you might get the gist of where we're going to answer this, but I'm going to let the experts answer it. Is that when it comes to hiring an MSL, do pharmaceutical companies prefer PharmDs with clinical experience or those who come from pharmaceutical fellowships?
Okay, yeah, I think this is really it. In my experience, it's based on the person, the hiring manager. So I think some people prefer fellowship and some people prefer clinical experience. I would say it really, again, it depends on you. I think that everyone, and if you have neither one and you might come from a completely different background, it depends on you. And I think each hiring manager is looking for something a little bit different. And I think they're both, you're able to get the job either way, right?
Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah. Yeah, I think ultimately what I've found, and I tell this to my pharmacy students, I've had, over 1,000 pharmacy students throughout the year that have come, rotated through my sites and as P4 students, is that it's really, again, how you package yourself. I keep saying this, and it's, but if you, and you have to believe in yourself. And I think, you can't rely on that recruiter or that random person. You have to really, if you really want to do this, then you can get it done. And I think, you can't stop in too short.
Yep. Absolutely.
I mean, I think this next question is probably one that we can kind of all relate to in some way, which is that they all know that finding an interview on LinkedIn is so hard, but what recommendation can you give someone?
We're finding to
get an interview.
Yeah,
like job hunting on
I think it comes down to the keywords again. I think like those buzzwords are exactly what there's a very strategic way to leverage LinkedIn, and I'm sure you can go on YouTube and find like videos on the way that people can educate you on how to leverage these keyword
searches. I think it's also in the book.
It's probably in the book. So leverage those keyword searches to find those opportunities that are exactly what you're looking for. There's a lot of filters available that can get you to exactly what you're looking for in the right area that you want. So I think just being really strategic about the way you leverage that tool.
Yeah. And I think what you had said earlier too, you don't want to look for a pharmacist. I mean, you're not going to find a pharma role that says we need a pharmacist, because they're not going to write pharmacist, So I think, again, it's the words that you're looking for, life sciences. I mean, I'll get, that's an easy one. And then you can land it. You just gotta persistence.
Yeah.
So and I'm gonna go further back about networking. Okay, because honestly, networking is going to help create that advantage. But one of the things I think you need to be comfortable with is asking for help. And if you think about it, if I went to Megan and said, I need some help, I would hope Megan would turn around and say, I'll try to do the best I can. Now, she may not always have the time, or Suzanne may not always have the time. But I think that we also have to be comfortable saying, I need some help. I have an opportunity, or I'm really trying to get in. Is there someone that you can connect me with? Because again, you need to kind of reach out. Now, hopefully what you've had a chance to do is maybe establish or form some relationship earlier on, so that when you do need to make that ask, that, people do it. But most people are going to try if they can to kind of, especially if they know you, to help you kind of make that connection. And so I would definitely say reach out. And a lot of that has to do with when you do finally get an opportunity, is try to find out on LinkedIn, who the hiring manager are, what the different people are, and see if you can connect, see if you know somebody who knows somebody, so that you can kind of connect with them. But I really think, everything that we've heard today, is really going to be important, but also building those relationships, getting connected. And I think that's going to make a difference.
Absolutely. I think that's, again, the quality side of it too. If you know exactly where you want to be, or at least close to where you want to be, or the industry or the organization or the company, putting yourself in positions where you can meet people organically in those places. So conferences, events that they're hosting, things of that nature. I think starting that as soon as you can is really a great way to go about it as well.
Yeah. No, that's right. Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to end today's webinar. I want to thank our guests again for sharing all those insights. I hope everybody had a chance to kind of learn a little bit more about what it's like to kind of try and break into the life sciences role. I can see on the screen there that you can see that there's QR codes for connecting with our guests as well as ACMA, and I highly encourage everybody to do that. And again, join our LinkedIn network at ACMA. We're constantly publishing things. We're posting for opportunities. And again, thank you for spending a little bit of time with us, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.